Okay, so yes, we have time traveled. I ran out of space on my memory card. My SD adapter wouldn't work, so I could import the video. So I had to wait for a SD card reader that would work. And now it's 3 days later. I don't remember. But it is cold. I am cold. I'm gonna try and get through this. So I left off about when I started to get numb. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, yeah. So yeah, that is how numb I was, because I didn't care if a tornado came through and tore up our house and, like, I don't know, just Wizard of Oz dust into not Kansas. But yeah, I was practically just treated as if I was a rebellious teenager, because I would sleep all day. I didn't want to do anything or go anywhere or talk to anyone. It was blamed on me being on the computer all night. You know, the typical, you know, stuff. And, you know, to a degree that was correct, but what no one really knew at that time was that laptop was only one of two things keeping me alive at that point. The ability to go online and write my stories and just leave here for a little bit, even just in my head. And my love for drawing. And the middle of the night was when I felt at peace. Everybody else was asleep, and, you know, when I was awake, it was always just like, oh, look who got out of bed, or you didn't do the dishes, or you're so depressing. I don't really remember an instance during that time when I was approached, like, gently and genuinely asked if I was okay. Like, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but if it did, the amount of bad interactions overshadowed that, and like I said earlier, my memory is really fuzzy from that time. But yeah, I was basically treated like it was my fault that I was acting the way I was, because I was just a lazy, moody teen. Those teenagers. And that only made things worse, because not only could I not trust the friends I cared so much about, but I also couldn't trust my family anymore. I couldn't trust anyone in the congregation. I legitimately did not have a single person that I trusted. I didn't know how to trust anyone. And it all started with Jehovah's Witness doctrine twisting my mind, and having my parents believing that what it was putting me through was okay, because in the end we would be in paradise. And that's an ends justify the means mentality for anybody that wants a, I don't know, a more technical term, I guess. I don't know. And I know, like, my parents and my mom didn't mean to cause harm or make things worse. This isn't me trying to, like, bash on her or make her out to be a horrible person, and I don't want anything to, like, go back on her, because we're on good terms now, and she has been learning and unlearning things a lot the same as me. Mental health wasn't taken as seriously back when I was dealing with all of that. It was just a societal norm that if your teenager stays in bed all day and won't do anything, then they're just being rebellious and lazy. Especially so for boomer parents whose mental health as they were children wasn't considered at all, especially on my dad's part. I'm not saying that is necessarily an excuse, because it could have easily been avoided with research, but I can't blame them entirely either, because for one, you know, internet wasn't really a thing like in my early childhood and all that, or when, you know, my mom was first studying, so she couldn't like go online and check for like other Jehovah's Witness stories and stuff. So it's been a learning process for all of us, but I didn't understand any of that at the time. Like, I could not for the life of me figure out why I was feeling what I was feeling. All I knew was that I just wanted it to stop. I started wondering, if I died today, would I still be resurrected in paradise? Would Jehovah forgive me for ending my life? I wrestled with that for quite a while. I don't remember how long it... that whole time is like a black hole in my head. But yeah, eventually I came to the conclusion that even if he wouldn't forgive me, at least I wouldn't feel like this anymore. I wouldn't have to wake up to this anymore. I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to be here anymore. So one night while everyone was asleep, I decided I'm done. And I was sitting there with a razor blade in my hand, and Sebastian, my dog at the time, came to me wanting me to hold him. He saved my life that night. And even when I would think about doing it again, I just couldn't leave him. I had rescued him from a really abusive situation, and then he rescued me. And to be honest, I didn't want to stop writing either. My dog and my creativity, my ability to escape into my own head, are what kept me alive. I didn't understand that the reason I was so hurt and in so much pain emotionally and mentally was because I felt like I literally had no one. Jehovah wouldn't answer my prayers. I would pray for so long that I would fall asleep, and it felt like I was always just talking to a wall. My dad wasn't really any help either, because on top of being disabled, he had started drinking more and more and more throughout the years, and he had never been emotionally there for me or my brother to begin with. He was mostly just a dictator, basically. As long as everything was being done his way, everything was chill. Which is essentially what Jehovah's Witnesses believe the Bible says anyway, for the husband slash father to be the head of the household. So that's what was always just accepted, because that's what Jehovah wanted. And at some time I finally broke and told my mom how I was depressed because my former friend had betrayed me. And I mean, that was slightly true, but you know, obviously wasn't the core reason. It wasn't until I blamed how I was acting on someone else that I was finally taken seriously. I didn't know how else to get help other than to lie, because if she felt like I was blaming her again, it would end up in another argument. After that, my mom took me to the doctor and I got on some antidepressants for a while and had a bad reaction, then didn't go back to the doctor for years. A few years ago, I realized that it wasn't a reaction to the medication. I had a severe anxiety/panic attack because right before it happened, like, my dad had started shouting about the dishes not being done, and I knew it was directed at me because people born with particular genitals are supposed to wash the dishes. My brother wasn't expected to. It was always me or my mom. And it triggered me and I ran to my room and started hyperventilating and thought I was dying. I mean, I did have issues with doing the dishes and other chores, and I had a hard time understanding why at the time. And it's just like, because I was feeling manipulated to do them. Like, it was never, do you mind washing the dishes, or can you help me wash the dishes? It was, someone needs to do the dishes. And that just felt manipulative to me. And I was super sensitive to that. I just didn't know why at first. I thought it was because I'd felt manipulated by my friends and by Satan, but lo and behold, I was being manipulated by a high control organization. But anyway, I do still have issues with feeling manipulated at times. Okay. Yeah, I still have issues with feeling manipulated at times, even when that's not the case. And it... Hi. You good? And it can be over, like, the pettiest things, like getting a message from a friend texting me, like, OMG, and, like, fishing for a response, like, oh, what, or something. And that will get under my skin because I feel like I'm being manipulated to, like, respond, even though I know it's not a big deal. Like, it's just how some people interact with others. And I have to fight myself not to be an ass over it, because I know it's stupid and it's still ingrained in my brain. That's how much high control organizations can mess you up. By making minuscule things feel like an attack when they aren't. Anyway, we had been kind of sparse on going to the meetings for a while, so we started going back more regularly again at this point in my life that I don't remember exactly when. Started reading the daily text, going out in service more. At this point, I was practically a robot. I did and said anything and everything I thought I had to. It was the only way I knew how to survive. I'd always get told, "You're so quiet." I just didn't know what to say. My voice wasn't actually being heard, and I didn't know how to voice my opinion, really. I couldn't relate to people. I didn't know how to actually socialize, and I also have had and still have severe social anxiety, which made me a horrible witness. I hated the field ministry. I tried to come up with some excuse as to why I couldn't be the one to talk at the door, and like, I was in constant panic mode. I very rarely raised my hand at the meetings, and I only did so when I felt like it would be worse if I didn't do it, like, backlash wise. I think I only did like 2 parts, maybe. I couldn't memorize scriptures to save my life. And I was constantly either unable to focus and falling asleep in the meetings, or just not there mentally, you know. And because of all of this, I never felt good enough. Nothing I did was good enough. And for those of you that don't know, when you're raised a Jehovah's Witness, you're basically expected to be as perfect as you possibly can be. You know, we obviously knew we were imperfect, and that was always reiterated, but because we expected to become perfect in this new world and all, and we were witnesses for Jehovah, that we had to be as like perfect as possible and set a good example. And I just could not achieve that. So I was constantly afraid that Jehovah wouldn't approve of me and allow me in paradise, which I've noticed is a very common feeling amongst ex-Jehovah's Witnesses too. And unlike in like most Christian religions, you know, you get baptized and you're set, you're good to go, you're going to heaven or whatever it is you want to believe. It's not that way with Jehovah's Witnesses, because even if you are baptized and you do something wrong, you know, you're always constantly questioning, like, oh, I sinned today, well, if Armageddon comes tomorrow, am I gonna be able to get into paradise or whatever? So you're just constantly like in this headspace of trying not to upset, you know, God, because then you're gonna die, basically. I only recently found out that I had ADHD this entire time, which explains a lot of the trouble I was having. I tried writing notes and would end up daydreaming and drawing. I'd tried drawing like just random things, like not anime related, while listening to the talks, and then would get griped at for drawing during the talk, even though it was perfectly okay for the sister down the road to do the same thing. Ever since I started writing and creating characters, that's all I wanted to do. So inevitably at the meetings, I would just zone out and daydream and come up with scenes for my stories and work out the plot and, you know, figure out my characters, get to know them more, and basically made up my own friends. But that's what kept me sane. Do you want out? Really? Right now? So at some point during this span between like 13 and 15 years old, I started talking to Lorna again and online, and we would share writing and art and stuff. And then I also met Kelsey, who I'm still really good friends with. But anyway, having someone to talk to helped. I didn't feel as alone, and Kelsey also liked to write, so we would do email role plays a lot with characters we based off of a video game, and which was something I genuinely enjoyed, you know, getting to be someone else for a while. I still tried to indoctrinate Kelsey too, as she was a Christian, or well, she still is a Christian, but just not the right kind of Christian, you know. But that also didn't work. It's really messed up when you meet someone and you make a new friend or whatever, and your first instinct is to try and get them to believe the same thing you do and join the same religion so they can be just like you, to try and change them. But anyway, as I was interacting with them, there was still that nagging at the back of my mind, like, you can't trust worldly people and they're gonna die in Armageddon anyway, so don't get too close to them. And that's another side to the problem I was having, because I had no other family or friends in the truth. I knew everyone else that I loved was going to die. So I didn't allow myself to get too close to anyone. Not my grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Not the people who I considered my friends. I kept a wall up so that when they would all die in Armageddon, I wouldn't be as upset. I learned how to numb myself, turn off my emotions, or more accurately, suppress them. I would have nightmares of going through Armageddon and having to leave them or watch them die, and for a while I had this reoccurring nightmare of family and friends trying and like begging and like crying to get into our house, which I guess was a safe place since we were Jehovah's people and all, and I would always end up crying in this dream because I couldn't let them in, and I'd have to watch and listen to them dying. Every time Armageddon would get brought up in a talk or a conversation or anything, I always had this sense of dread, not excitement like most other witnesses seem to have. Around that time, I ended up making friends with a sister who is in her 40s, I think. I can't remember. We'll call her Sue. Anyway, we both liked art, so that became a thread that pulled us together, and she mentored me a lot. We got so close that I would house sit for her and her husband when they would go out of town and stuff, and she took me out on a lot of out of town trips too, which is a really big deal in my area because we are like 3 to 4 hours away from everything. We're like in the middle of nowhere. And I started thinking, like, is this what I've been looking for? Is this the true friendship that Jehovah wants me to have? And then I graduated high school in 2012, and it was one of the very few things we were allowed to celebrate, so I was very excited that I would get to have a party and receive gifts and stuff. Which, even though it was justified, I still felt selfish for wanting presents, and I still do whenever, like, people give me things. I'm like, I feel like I shouldn't accept it. It's stupid. Anyway, Sue organized my graduation party and everything. It was like this mix of neon 80s style with a Japanese twist, because I still love Japan and anime and had plans to potentially go and live in Japan for a while. I was learning Japanese and everything. I kind of still am, like, off and on. For the ministry, of course, because every skill you learn needs to be for Jehovah's organization. I just wanted to watch anime without subs and maybe translate manga. But anyway. Sue kept getting calls from, like, various sisters asking what I liked so they knew what to get me for my graduation. People I knew my whole life that I'd grown up with, been around the majority of my childhood, didn't know what to gift me. And I think that was probably the first real crack in my faith that would just keep spreading. And even during that party, I kept having this weird feeling, like, deep within my chest, like I wanted to scream. I left that party feeling sad because it was my party, the first one I'd ever had that was specifically for me, and I wasn't able to actually be me. I had to be the Jehovah's Witness version of me. And of course all of, like, the games we played were Bible related, and I couldn't invite my worldly friends because no one really knew I had them to begin with, and if they did, then I would have a target on my back, and, you know. The majority of the gifts I received were, like, the typical kind of girly items, and, you know, that's obviously not me. And I feel guilty for saying that because I don't want to come off as ungrateful, especially because receiving gifts as a JW like that is rare. But at the same time, it more so reiterated the fact that these people had no clue about me or who I am, despite having spent years around me. Even after the fact that some of them had called asking what I liked, and for some reason didn't give me anything within those subjects, like art or Japan. Except for, like, a couple different people, but those were ones that, like, were closer to me. And before the party happened, we got the exciting news that we would be getting a new Kingdom Hall. Yay! If I remember correctly, the build happened near the time of the party. I can't remember if it was before or after, but I remember they were kind of close. I don't know. Anyway, everyone was excited for it. Everyone wanted to help out on the build. This was back when, like, they changed the name, and I started, like, it was like right before they changed the name. I don't remember what it was called. It was like, I want to say it was RGB, but that's not right. Is it? I don't remember. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I can get into that. That sounds cool. I like crafting and making things and building things. But I wasn't baptized yet. I was 17? No, well, I had just turned 18 when I graduated, so it was something like that. I don't remember. And for those that don't know, that's actually kind of late for a born-in witness to not be baptized. But I wanted to be on this build, and you have to be baptized. I had heard so much about it, how much fun they are. Sue was telling me that maybe I could make friends there because it's not just people in that town that go for builds, it's people in like neighboring towns too, and like sometimes neighboring states. They come in. And she knew how ostracized I was even within the congregation, so her saying that really got my hopes up. I thought, yeah, if they're going on builds and stuff, then they're probably people who I would have something in common with. All of us working on the build for free, saving the organization a lot of money. Unfortunately, there just wasn't enough time for me to get baptized before the build actually happened. Because for Jehovah's Witnesses, it's not something you just decide to do and go do it. You have to study and pass certain criteria before you're approved to be baptized. And then, you know, you have to wait for an assembly or a convention to happen to be baptized there, pretty much. So I was pretty bummed about that, you know, not being able to work on like my own Kingdom Hall. And then I found out that one of the elders' sons, unbaptized, was on the build. I was pissed. I don't know how it is for other congregations, but there had always been a huge problem with favoritism in my congregation. You know, they deny it, of course, but there was no hiding it from ones that had been there for years, all their life. We even had a few talks on it, like local needs talks, because it was so bad. Nora, child, can you stop, please? Nora, honey. Do I need to rub that stuff on you again? Okay. So yeah, that was another crack. Then we find out there's going to be another build in a nearby town. It was only like a 40-minute drive. I had time to get baptized before this one. So that's what I did. I studied and worked hard to get there. I even went to the Kingdom Hall by myself several times, which was a big deal for me. Went out in service, which I have absolutely always hated. But I pushed through it. And September of 2012, I was baptized. It's been over 10 years. Holy shit. To be honest, I wasn't ready. I think the elders knew I wasn't ready because I'd already been denied once. But they pushed it through anyway. I think because they needed the numbers at the time. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't want to discourage me. I don't know. Getting to the assembly I was to be baptized at was an absolute disaster. It was like a 2-hour drive, pouring rain. We had an old Windstar van back then that was honestly about to blow up. The windshield wipers stopped working halfway there. Something else happened that made us leave late, and I can't remember what that was anymore. But yeah, we got to the assembly late, and everyone was saying, you know, Satan really didn't want you to get baptized, did he? You know, because everything bad that happens is because of Satan. Especially if it's something that tries to hinder anything to do with service to Jehovah. So yeah, I guess Satan can control the weather and decided to make it rain and broke our windshield wipers just to stop me specifically from getting baptized. Maybe he was trying to tell me something. The build in the nearby town happened and I got to go. Woo! I honestly did enjoy it to a degree. It was more in my, like, comfort range, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. I made friends, kind of. Had some laughs, learned a few things. Had a severe allergic reaction because they assigned me to the painting crew. And the fumes kicked my ass. But I was still expected to be there to help the next day. I got to sleep in though, and then practically go and blow my nose every couple minutes. So yeah, that was fun. And I slept under a trailer for over 2 hours. Oh, and I was also driving a vehicle that had no AC at the time in Texas for 2 years straight. During this time, as I was trying to get baptized and even go to the building back, at one point I had to give a sister a ride home from the build. She was a little younger than me. Anyway, I had to take her home in this car with no AC. About an hour and a half drive. And the whole way she was complaining about how her family was going to downsize their home to have a more minimalistic lifestyle. They didn't have to, they just chose to. It really speaks to the tone deafness of ones who truly haven't ever had to struggle to get by, and as a Jehovah's Witness in general, and typically witnesses tend to be very poor because college is frowned upon, and having a career that cuts into, you know, door-to-door time is also frowned upon. But in my congregation, there just happened to be a few families that own their own businesses, and some of that came from a wealthy family to begin with. So, like I mentioned earlier, there was a very noticeable difference as to which side of the fence you were on in a financial sense. And my family was one of the poorest, if not the poorest family in the congregation. I can't really think of any other that seemed to be struggling as much as us, but it could just be that I didn't know it at the time, or I was young. So then another build happened nearby but was further out, so me and Sue drove up and stayed at a sister's house with several others for like 3 or 4 days. This one was during winter and it was freezing. I hated it. I already don't like cold weather because I have a pain disorder and cold makes it inflame. So not only was I cold, I was in pain. But there I was. I was gonna help build a kingdom hall for Jehovah. And then I got bleach in my eye. Which everything turned out okay, but it stung like a mother. At some point during this span between 13 and 15 years old, I started talking to Lorna again online, and we would share our writing and stuff, and Ranger is howling. I don't know if it's picking it up. I think at the time, and for those that don't know, oh my God. Nora, you scared me.